Welcome to Lake County Schools Ed Talks, a podcast about all the exciting things going on in our district. Sponsored by Addition Financial Credit Union.
Hello, I'm Sherry Owens, Communications Officer for Lake County Schools, and this is Ed Talks, a podcast all about the amazing things happening in our schools. And today we have as our guest David Cohen. He's an instructor who is overseeing the new aviation programs in our schools. And if you aren't aware of these programs, prepare to be blown away by the outstanding opportunities that are being afforded to our students here in Lake. So thank you, Mr. Cohen, for being with us.
Sherry, thank you very much for having me.
So as we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you became interested in helping students learn about aviation and what brought you here to Lake County?
Absolutely. So it started my professional career in the Air Force. I got commissioned through ROTC and was an engineer for about the first 3 years of my Air Force career. And I had a friend of mine who had applied to Air Force pilot training. She got accepted, and I said, how'd you do that? So she gave me the info. I applied, I got in. And so for 26 years, I flew airplanes in the Air Force. Big airplanes, small airplanes, kind of all over the spectrum, deployed to various places, and retired in 2014 and worked for Disney for a couple of years. And then there was an opportunity to teach junior ROTC in another school district in the area. I did that for about 5 years, and while I was there, we built a relationship with Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University out of Daytona, and we were able to actually start to do dual enrollment classes. So they were college-level classes for our kids in the high school, and we focused initially on the private pilot curriculum. So in order to get your private pilot license, there's two tests you have to take. One is a physical in-the-airplane test, takeoffs, landings, maneuvers, those kind of things. And the other is a written exam. So we got them ready for the written exam. So we did that for about 2 or 3 years. And somewhere around year 4, I got some notifications. The folks from Lake County were interested and wanted to come see. So some representatives from the district came out, looked at what we were doing, really liked it, and didn't hear anything past then. And about a year later, they said, we'd really like to do this. I said, great. And we want you to come do it. So we had a couple more conversations, and so this is now year 2 for me teaching here in Lake County. So in addition to teaching the classes in the classroom, then I'm also the program specialist, kind of overseeing the aviation programs throughout the county. We started with 3 schools. We're at 4 schools this year, 6 next year. So we continue to grow and continue to provide our kids these great opportunities that many of them never knew it existed before in aviation.
Well, we sure did luck out by getting you here, so I am so glad that you are part of the Lake County Schools family now. Before we get into, you gave a great overview, and we're going to go take a deeper dive and learn a little bit more about which schools have these programs and the kinds of things that they're doing. But before we go there, talk about aviation as a career choice and why you think it's something that more students ought to consider.
The aviation industry, sort of as a whole, has gone through lots of ups and downs over the course of my time in aviation. That's been 30 some odd years. And it's been in about the last 5 to 10 years that there hasn't been any downs yet. We did take a little bit of a hit during COVID, and everyone thought that was a big downturn, and the aviation industry came back. So whether that's airlines flying, whether that's cargo carriers, whether that's small little commuters, whether that's people who are looking for a hobby. One of the biggest things that sort of happened as COVID was beginning to tail off was flight schools were inundated by students who were tired of sitting around and wanted to do this. And over the course of COVID said, I've always wanted to go fly. I want to go do it now. And they couldn't keep up with the demand. At the same time, people began to fly in the airlines. And we've seen, unfortunately, some of the impact of not having enough pilots. A number of the major airlines this summer actually had to cancel large blocks of flights, not because they didn't have airplanes, they didn't have crews to fly them. And so that's now telling us that there is continuing to be this huge demand. The Boeing company does a study every year to try to identify what the future of aviation looks like. And it's a long term. They look 20 years out. The last study that they just did at the end of 22 was that there's going to be a need for somewhere in the neighborhood of 800,000 new pilots.
Wow.
Somewhere around 200,000 in other places and probably another 400,000 in North America. That's a huge demand. And that's just the pilot side. The same kind of concepts are going to apply to maintenance professionals, to those working cabin crew inside aircraft, flight attendants. And so when you start to look at these things, you realize that this is a major employment opportunity for young people, specifically here in Lake County. It's our kids.
Right.
And so if we can get an opportunity to inject them into that system, give them these choices, get them exposed to the material, and honestly, give them a little bit of a head start, that's a great thing. And so that's really what we're trying to do. So
just curious, when you talk about this growth and opportunity, is that largely because of retirements among the pilots now? Is that what's going on? There is some of that. So the FAA mandates that airline pilots can't fly past, for the airlines, can't fly past 65. So we're now getting to the point where we had a number of pilots over the course of time in history who are now getting to that age and have mandatory retirements. I think the other piece of that is simply the demand is huge. People want to move around. They want to go from place to place, in spite of the fact that we figured out how to do Zoom and some of these video conferencing things. That in-person piece can't be beat. That's on the people side. The cargo side is incredible. The folks at FedEx, UPS, DHL, Amazon continue to see record numbers of flights because the demand for cargo, their items that they're selling and moving, is huge. And so the ability to meet that is simply at this point being dictated by the number of air crews they can put out there. Well, I'm glad you mentioned DHL, Amazon, FedEx, those folks, because I think for a lot of us, when we think about aviation, we think about commercial airline pilots. That's who we see when we think about aviation. But what I've learned just in a short time, kind of doing some research and learning about the programs here at Lake County, is that when you talk about aviation careers, that it's much more expansive than that. It includes those companies with cargo, like you mentioned, but other careers as well. Talk about the other kinds of careers that might come under the aviation umbrella that we are preparing our students for. So every time an airplane moves, it takes literally an army of people to make that airplane actually function. The obvious visible piece of that are the pilots, the flight attendants, the gate agents. There are weather folks, meteorologists. There are folks working baggage. There are folks well in the background maintaining these airplanes that are flying hundreds, if not thousands of hours a year, and they take some tender loving care. There are folks who are constantly designing new aircraft. You know, the next phase of the aviation revolution, if you will, is going to be electric power. So how does that look? How do we incorporate these aircraft into the system? And now that's on the manned side. There's an entire new industry of unmanned aircraft, drones, where the sky is quite honestly the limit without, being too funny about it. But I think there's a huge opportunity in that because other industries, not aviation industries, are taking advantage. So whether it's real estate, whether it's the power companies doing inspection on power lines, these things used to either be very expensive or impossible to do. And now it takes a drone that is a couple $1,000s at most with a decent camera, and you can do an awful lot. And oh, by the way, those operators who are actually flying them don't need college degrees. So we can have our kids literally coming right out of high school with their diplomas out of Lake County schools, starting into business, making money, making an impact, and really making a career for themselves. And that's what we want for our students. So let's talk a little bit about how we started the aviation program here in Lake. You gave us a little bit of information about your background and how you got here, but which schools did we start at and what kinds of things were we offering there? And let's start there, and then we'll talk about how things are looking now, and then we're going to look to the future. So how did we get started? Absolutely. So we started with 3 schools. So it was Eastridge, Southlake, and Eustis. Eastridge was focused primarily on unmanned aircraft. So Mr. Mark Day, who's the instructor out there, former Navy guy, I don't hold that against him, but has a good background in aviation and flying and had been teaching engineering there
at Eastridge as well. And so he was able to roll pretty easily then into this unmanned curriculum. So we have a curriculum provider who provides us the content, company called USI. And so with that, we not only are teaching the kids, but they, no kidding, we're starting to fly drones. So you tell, a high school sophomore, junior, hey, this class, we're going to go fly drones, and they get really excited.
Yeah.
So that started to build a little bit of momentum there. Over at Southlake High School, under the Navy JROTC program, Lieutenant Colonel Hal Pilot had also been with me in a previous district where we were teaching Embry-Riddle, so he was very familiar with it. So he actually began a similar kind of program where it was kind of an intro to aviation and some of the science the first semester. Second semester then was drones. I rolled in over at Eustis High School and began teaching 3 different classes. So we started with a 9th grade curriculum that's been developed by the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. They're a huge support, training, lobbying group for general aviation around the country, around the world. And so they have built a high school curriculum over the course of the last 5 years or so. So we started with a 9th grade class and a 10th grade class. 9th grade looks at what are the kind of jobs you can do in aviation, how does an airplane fly, some of the basics. We get into 10th grade and it starts to become more about, all right, these are the specifics. Here is how a reciprocating engine actually works. Here's how a jet engine works. Here's all the different parts and pieces, the air traffic control system. So I was teaching in the 9th and 10th grade, as well as then this private pilot written course, where the students, Embry-Riddle dual enrollment credit, were able to then finish and take as kind of their industry certification the private pilot written exam. So we had 4 of them at Eustis this last year that actually took it and passed, which is pretty impressive.
Yes.
And more impressive, 2 of them have actually gone on to earn their private pilot certificates. So they, no kidding, got in airplanes, took instruction, and we're out flying. And one of them finished in August, the other finished in September. So that's pretty amazing. Where you're looking at these high school kids where they're barely driving at this point, and now they're flying airplanes, right?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
So that's how we got here.
So that's a great way that we started. But then things started to change and to grow a little bit. So how's the program looking this year?
So as we started to look forward toward the future, we had an opportunity to work with our state representatives in Tallahassee and see if we could bring some additional money into the program. So we were successful. Representative Keith Trenow was hugely helpful in making that happen. And he was able to, with his contacts and the district contacts, push forward legislation where we ended up getting $350,000, not for the schools, but specifically for the school aviation programs, which is pretty impressive.
Yes.
To the point where it passed the houses, the governor signed it, and so now we have that kind of money.
Great.
The intent then is to grow the program. So what we have now done for 22-23 is we've added Leesburg High School. Major Glenn Tussing teaching the Air Force Junior ROTC program out there is also teaching that Embry-Riddle Intro to Aviation and the drone course second semester. And then our plan for next year is to add 2 additional schools. So Lake Mineola is going to begin those 9th and 10th grade AOPA Intro to Aviation classes, along with then the dual enrollment with Embry-Riddle. And then Umatilla High School is going to have a very unique aviation entrant where they're going to bring drone agriculture to the forefront. They do a very big agriculture program up at Umatilla right now.
Yeah.
And so the intent is, can you use drones for agriculture? You can figure out when crops go into photosynthesis, and it's easier to figure out which parts of the fields have problems with crops, and you can apparently count livestock a lot easier. Things I don't completely understand, but drones make that happen. And so as sort of their senior year capstone level course, the students at Umatilla then are going to be able to take this ag drone course, curriculum developed by the Farm Bureau and Embry-Riddle, specifically to be able to get these ag students that next leg up in their industry. And there are 2 schools up in the Panhandle currently teaching that in the state of Florida, and that's it. So we will be the first school up there at Umatilla to be able to actually teach this in Central Florida, which is really kind of exciting.
That's wonderful. Lake leads the way again.
Again.
I love it. I love it. So Looking forward, are there any thoughts about expanding even beyond that, maybe even to some younger students?
So we have started now to look at what is possible in the future. And again, our partnership with Embry-Riddle, they've done a very good job of actually building middle school programs down in South Florida. So down in Miami-Dade, that area, they've actually been bringing into the 8th grade classroom aviation classes. So our intent is this next year, 23-24, to do the same thing. We're still working on exactly which schools and how many, but the intent is start them getting excited, kind of wet their whistle a little bit, get them interested, and allow them to build this relationship with aviation so that now by the time they get to high school, it's not, well, should I? It's which class am I going to take? Which aviation class am I going to take? Because I'm continuing this. And so, younger, I'm not saying younger and younger like kindergarten, but anytime you can bring aviation into the STEM curriculum, science, technology, engineering, math, anytime you're able to do that, it provides a more direct connection, I think, sometimes to the kids to say, that airplane that you're seeing in the sky or that helicopter or that drone, that's STEM. It doesn't have to be do your multiplication tables. Right. It's got a real application. And then I think they start to get excited about it.
You talked about Umatilla and the unmanned program, the drone program that they are going to have there in partnership with the agriculture program that they already have. But there are some other interesting things happening in Umatilla with aviation.
There are interesting things in Umatilla. So you wouldn't really think Umatilla would be the center of aviation in anywhere, but it actually kind of is here for Lake County. So a number of years ago, before I started, there was a partnership that started between the Lake County Schools Foundation and the Experimental Aircraft Association chapter up at the Umatilla Airport. So if not familiar, Umatilla does in fact have an airport, about 3,500 foot runway there and fuel. In fact, some of the least expensive fuel in the state of Florida, which is not a bad thing for those of us that fly and have to pay for it. But as part of this partnership, they built an aviation club, and it was primarily, at least initially, with the kids at Umatilla High School. And they were doing two things. The first was they had some flight simulators, kind of desktop things, but they were pretty realistic. In fact, the FAA has certified them as usable to actually log hours. And so the members of this EAA chapter would coach the kids, and they'd have flight instructors, and they would work them through this to actually build some aviation skills. The other thing that they were doing then during this aviation club is they were building an airplane, like a real live airplane, not a model, not a mock-up, like a real live airplane. It's made by a company called Vans, and they specifically build kits. And so just like you would build anything in your house, it comes in a lot of boxes, but they put together this aircraft. It's an RV-12 is the model of the aircraft. And they've been working on it for 2 or 3 years at this point now. The tail section is complete. The fuselage is complete. Both wings are complete. The landing gear is on the fuselage. And sometime, probably spring, summer, we're actually going to put the engine in the aircraft.
Wow.
So the intent is that, and oh, by the way, the PS to this, which I think is not really a PS, it's kind of the headline is the kids have been doing the work. We have our members up at the EAA chapter who've built airplanes and they work on airplanes, helping, supervising, showing. But when it comes to actually pulling that rivet, it's our students. When it comes to pulling the wires and moving the fuel lines, it's our students. And it's more than just kind of building. It's obviously, it's the instruction. It's this is what you can do in aviation kind of concept. So the intent is we'll finish that airplane probably in a year and a half, maybe something like that. Get it all painted. Hopefully find a buyer, make it exactly what they want, sell it, take that money, and start all over again.
What an advantage these kids have. Yeah. They've got a leg up. This is amazing, a wonderful opportunity. So if parents are listening to this podcast and they're thinking, I want my child to be a part of this, what do we say to those parents? How do they get their children involved? So
the first easiest thing to do is contact your school and the school counselor and say, I'm interested in having my student be part of this program. Do we offer it here in my school? through school choice. If that's not necessarily an option, they may be able to attend a different school.
Right.
The Aviation Club up at Umatilla is open to any school. So right now we primarily have the students out of Umatilla and Eustis High Schools, but that's only because it's just geographically close.
Right.
If there's somebody down in the Claremont area who wants to do this, come on out.
Yeah.
Run it 3 to 5 on Fridays. Actually, we do it a few more times during the summer.
Okay.
So if they do have questions, by all means, they can contact their school guidance counselor. Contact me. I'm over at Eustis High School. So
Wonderful.
if they give us a shout, we can get it aimed in the right direction.
That's good news. Is there anything else about the program that you'd like to add?
I just sort of a thank you. So, we don't get through any of this, first of all, without leadership. So the superintendent, Ms. Cornegie, has been hugely important to making sure all this happened. Yes. While a leader can say, I want to do this, she literally made it work. So she provided the funding and went through the different channels to make sure that everybody was on board. So she was huge. Mm-hmm. And then the other piece of this is the foundation of Lake County Schools. They have been huge, the Education Foundation, in providing funding, providing support. And one of the big things that always amazes me is anytime we have a conversation, it usually ends with, what else can we do?
Yeah.
So they're always looking for new opportunities, and we're always willing to provide those opportunities for support. So huge thanks to them as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And a huge thanks to you for being with us today as part of Lake County Schools Ed Talks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharon.
And I know that the parents are going to appreciate all of this good information, and it's a wonderful opportunity for our students. Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you very much.
Lake County Schools Ed Talks is a production of the Lake County Schools Communications Department, made possible in part by Addition Financial. Please join us again soon.